Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the flickering world of medieval Europe, where shoemakers hunched over workbenches by candlelight, carving and stitching away long after the rest of the town fell asleep. You can almost feel the heavy wooden shutters closed tight, the quiet scratch of an awl punching through thick leather, the distant bark of a night watchman making his rounds. The air is damp, smoky, and perfumed with the tang of animal hides. It's the kind of place where you probably wouldn't survive a day. Between the cramped streets, questionable sanitation, and a constant fear of thieves, medieval life was no picnic. So, before you get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand behind the workbench, your hands sticky with hide glue, a half-finished shoe resting in front of you. Outside, the night is hushed in a way you'll never quite hear during the day, with only the occasional scurrying rat or a dog barking far off near the town gates. Your candle burns low, dripping tiny waterfalls of wax down the metal holder. Each little flicker sends shadows dancing across the leather scraps piled high, like a twisted puppet show. This night shoemaking world has its own heartbeat. Daytime belongs to the guild masters, the market barkers, the priests, and the nagging customers pounding at your workshop door. But night is yours. In the darkness, the rules soften just like the leather itself, and you can slip into your craft with an almost meditative rhythm, stitching soles and mending uppers until the rooster crows again. Why work at night, you wonder? Historians still argue whether it was mainly a matter of guild edicts or simple survival. Some say shoemakers were banned from hammering during the day, as the racket disturbed neighbors and other merchants. Others argue that daytime belonged to sales and trade, leaving actual shoemaking for the night shift. A third camp insists it was mostly about chasing fresh air, since the pungent stink of leather, tallow, and glues mixed into a potent miasma that might make even the most iron-stomached customer gag by day. A fun little fringe fact to slip in here. Medieval shoemakers sometimes claimed their shoes fit better when sewn by night, thanks to the steady hand of a craftsman away from daytime distractions. Whether that's truth or just shoemaker bravado, no one can really say, but it's certainly made for good boasting at the tavern. There's something surprisingly peaceful about working through the night. Maybe it's the way the sounds of the town die away one by one, or how the chill night air seeps in through the cracks of the workshop walls and cools your sweat-soaked brow. Maybe it's the way candlelight softens the imperfections in the leather, or simply how you can focus without the thousand interruptions of daylight. One moment you're pulling the waxed linen thread through the tough upper, the next you're leaning back to stretch your shoulders and realizing dawn is already painting a pink line above the roof tiles. No factory bell rings. No manager's glare drives you to hurry. In a medieval workshop, the rhythm is your own, until the city bell chimes a new hour, maybe reminding you to say a prayer to Saint Crispin, patron of shoemakers, and take a sip of watered ale to keep going. As you work, your fingers move with a muscle memory born of years, maybe even decades, of the same gestures. The creak of leather, the scratch of the awl, the hiss of thread pulled tight, all blend into a strange lullaby. Every medieval shoemaker knew this music by heart. And so do you, as you slip another stitch through the waiting holes, cinching the upper onto the thick, resilient sole. In these hours, the town seems to belong to you alone. Beyond your shuttered door, city gates are locked, travelers barred until dawn, and only the rare clatter of a night guard's halberd marks the time. Even the rats feel bolder, scuttling for dropped crumbs around the workbench. And yes, you might even talk to them, offering a little grumble. Back off, furry friend, this is my night. There's something about medieval life that demanded resilience, a stubbornness, and nowhere is that clearer than in this humble workshop. While nobles held feasts and knights clanked around in plate armor, the shoemaker bent low, breathing in glue fumes, making sure some lady's dancing slippers would be ready for the next feast, or a farmer's boots were mended before the market reopened. And if you listen closely enough, you might even hear stories stitched into every shoe. The tale of a long journey, a broken heart, a hopeful new bride. People's lives literally walked through your hands. A shoe, after all, is never just a shoe. It is freedom, protection, maybe even a hint of social status. And every stitch, made in the quiet of night, helps carry those stories forward, soft as the dawn, tough as the soles you shape. You keep at your stitching as the hours slip by, the air growing colder and more comfortable than the stifling daytime heat that seems to cling to every plastered wall of the town. But soon, you're reminded of why the night suits you best. The streets in daylight are a riot of noise, carts thundering over cobblestones, town criers shouting the price of fish, pigs snuffling through gutter scraps, and the constant hammer of other trades echoing in crowded workshops. It's enough to drive a soul mad. But in the night, the only hammer is yours. The shoemaker's hammer, made of polished horn or simple iron, taps out a gentle rhythm you could almost fall asleep to. There is no roar of commerce, no pounding feet of customers shoving open your creaky door. That peace alone would be enough to make you choose these hours, but there's more. By medieval law, especially in bigger towns, the shoemakers were part of powerful guilds, associations of craftsmen who regulated not only how you learned your trade, but exactly when and how you could practice it. Historians still argue whether shoemakers themselves set the night shift tradition to avoid bumping heads with wealthier guilds, or if city rules forced them into it. After all, the noise of a shoemaker's hammer could easily drown out the measured hum of a goldsmith's hammer or disrupt the delicate negotiations of silk merchants, who had enough coin to complain to the city council. Daytime belonged to guild masters, inspectors, and the relentless peering of rivals. You might be fined for working too close to another trade shopfront, or for hammering out of rhythm with local guild codes. The night gave you an escape from those rules, an unpoliced moment to catch up on mending jobs without a nosy warden peering over your shoulder. As you lift a nearly finished slipper, its neat stitching glowing warm in the candlelight, you might wonder what life would be like without these restrictions. But then you catch a whiff of the thick leather, the sweetish tang of cowhide, and you realize this is simply how things have always been. Like the town's clocks ringing each hour, the guilds keep time in your life. It wasn't all bad, though. Medieval guilds often doubled as a second family, offering help in hard times, protection from unfair competition, even a bit of healthcare if you got injured. And while they might have pushed your hammer into the night, they also made sure you had a voice, even if it was a small, slightly hoarse voice from breathing leather dust all day. You could, in fact, join a feast day or a procession alongside your guild brothers, maybe wear your finest work apron, and for a brief moment, feel a sense of pride. You slip another bristle-tipped needle through the stiff sole, thinking of all those night hours spent with other trades. Because you weren't the only one driven into the darkness by rules. Bakers, for instance, were famous for their nighttime loaves. Brewers prepared their Alesh by night so they'd be ready by dawn. Tanners, those smelly cousins of shoemakers, sometimes left skins to soak overnight, checking them under torchlight. It makes you feel, strangely, not so alone. There's a solidarity in the night air, a shared understanding between people who had to work while the rest of the city dreamed. Even the night watchmen, clanging their bells and calling the hours, seemed part of that team, keeping an eye on all of you. You might even trade a greeting with the watchman on his rounds, a rough, "God keep you," spoken through a cracked doorway. One quirky note historians love to debate: were medieval shoemakers known for sneaking in a few illegal sales by night, avoiding taxes and fees? Some scribbled town records hint at under-the-table repairs done in the small hours, a tiny rebellion against the heavy-handed rules of guild life. Was it widespread? Or just a few rogue cobblers testing their luck? Historians still argue whether these tales were truth or rumor meant to scare apprentices straight. There is something rather daring about that possibility, isn't there? A secret slip of coins, a quiet promise. Bring me the boots after the bell rings, no receipts needed. You grin at the idea, even if you'd never risk such a thing yourself. The guild fines could empty your purse for months. A night shift was hardly glamorous, but you could make it your own. The children would be asleep, your wife might be snoring gently by the hearth, and you had only the steady candle and the creak of your stool for company. Some found that lonely. Others, maybe you among them, found it wonderfully peaceful. Every so often, you might pause to check the locks on your workshop door, just in case. Medieval towns weren't always safe at night, and thieves would happily steal your prized knives or even half-made shoes to sell in the morning market. The guild would frown on that, and you'd have to start all over. That tiny shot of fear kept you awake almost as much as the cold night air. The night had its dangers, after all. A rowdy drunk from the tavern, or a house fire started by a neighbor's untended candle, could ruin more than your stitching. Still, there was a pride in working by night. You could keep up with orders, polish your skills, and take quiet satisfaction that when dawn came, your work was done. No distractions, no fines, no shouting neighbors. You tap one last tack into place, lean back to stretch your sore shoulders, and blow out the candle as the town bell signals another hour gone. Sleep is precious in these years, but you give it up to keep your trade alive. Because when the town finally stirs and yawns its way into morning, you'll be ready with new shoes, fresh and clean, ready for muddy streets, dancing floors, or a pilgrim's journey. And no one, not even the nosiest guild master, can take away that sense of quiet accomplishment. And maybe, as you slip away to your narrow bed, you catch one final glimpse of the shoes lined up, soles shining softly in the fading candlelight, and you know tomorrow will bring more orders, more hammering, more life. Because medieval towns might rest, but they always need shoes, and you, patient cobbler, will always be there to stitch dreams into leather, one nighttime hour at a time. Your hands don't rest for long. The next night arrives as predictably as a merchant's complaint, and you light the candle once again. Its tiny flame reveals the quiet might of your tools, lined up in a neat row like soldiers ready for battle. The wooden lasts carved to match customers' feet, the awl with its polished bone handle, the curved blade that could slice through hide as if it were butter. These are the tools that make you a shoemaker, and they do their best work in the hush of night. You test the blade on a fresh scrap, its edge clean and true, slicing through vegetable-tanned cowhide that gives off a soft, grassy tang. During the day, the air is too hot, too dusty, and the leather dries too quickly, cracking before you can mold it. But at night, the cooler, moister air keeps it supple, obedient to your every tug and pull. Some say the night itself is a shoemaker's secret ingredient. The needle, too, seems easier to control when the candle's glow sharpens your focus, banishing all those daytime distractions. Historians still argue whether medieval craftsmen truly believed the night steadied their hands, or if that was simply a story told to justify their odd hours. But as you pull your waxed linen thread through the thick upper leather, you can't deny there's a hypnotic calm in these moments. You barely hear the distant dogs barking, or the gentle snore of someone sleeping nearby. Modern minds might scoff at these humble tools, but they're marvels of medieval engineering. The shoemaker's knife, for example, could be honed to a razor's edge with a sandstone wheel, and its tip shaped so delicately you could carve patterns into decorative slippers. And the bristle-tipped needle? Some shoemakers twisted horsehair into its eye, creating a flexible extension to push through stubborn leather, a clever hack long before the word hack existed. There's even a little superstition around these tools. You once heard that if a shoemaker lost his awl in the middle of the night, it spelled 7 years of bad luck, worse even than a black cat crossing your path. Of course, you keep a backup all hidden behind your water jug, just in case. Better safe than sorry, right? As you work, you can feel the faint vibrations of the hammer echo through the bench into your bones, almost like a heartbeat. That steady thump reassures you, keeping the rhythm while your eyes grow heavy. And it's a rhythm older than your own hands, passed down through generations of shoemakers who worked by night so their children might eat by day. One fringe theory you've heard suggests shoemakers avoided bright daylight because they feared jealous glances or even curses. In bustling medieval towns, where the evil eye was blamed for everything from spoiled milk to sudden fever, it wasn't so far-fetched that a rival might throw a spiteful look at a busy shoemaker's well-stocked shop. Working by night, behind shuttered windows, was a sort of protection from envy. Whether true or not, historians still argue whether these stories sprang from actual belief or from a shoemaker's well-practiced habit of guarding his secrets. You flex your fingers, massaging away a dull ache from hours of stitching. The waxed thread squeaks as it pulls through the hide, and the faint smell of beeswax is oddly comforting. Sometimes, just sometimes, you wonder if the tools have their own little souls, tiny guardians of your trade who keep watch over every stitch. There's a kind of ritual to these nights, trimming the edges, punching the holes, smoothing the heel, tapping in the nails with the hammer's precise, steady blows. Each movement is measured, almost meditative, leaving you in a trance as hours pass unnoticed. You barely register the town bell chiming another hour away. Beyond your shuttered window, you can sense the city's sleeping presence. A baby might wail in a loft across the alley. A night watchman calls the hour, his lantern swinging, its glow moving like a lazy star. You adjust your needle, grateful the night belongs to you, and to your tools, whose design hasn't changed in 100 years because they were already perfect. You pause to sip a bit of watered ale, letting the tangy liquid wash away the dryness of glue dust on your tongue. The air feels cleaner now, cooler, flowing over your forearms as you return to your work. No factory whistles, no overseers shouting, only the quiet discipline of your trade, night after night. Each tool has its place, its story, its pride. The curved knife, for example, reminds you of the tale of a master shoemaker who could cut perfect soles even blindfolded, or so the apprentices liked to brag. Whether that was true or just apprentice legend, you'll never know, but it still makes you smile as you run your thumb carefully along your own blade. When you finish a pair, you place it on the shelf in a neat line, proud that another order is done before the sun even rises. There is a strange comfort in knowing that you, alone with your tools, created something so essential, so quietly heroic, while the rest of the town slept on. You reach for another pattern, eyes a little gritty but hands still steady, ready to trace and cut and stitch again. Because in the medieval night, no one can take away your craft. And that, in the end, might be the greatest reason you and your tools thrive in this quiet darkness. You flex your tired hands as you move to the next stage of your work, eyeing a stack of thick hides waiting patiently by the bench. Leather, the very heart of a shoemaker's craft, was no easy material to tame. And like a stubborn old mule, it changed its mood depending on the time of day. You lean forward, breathing in the powerful, tangy scent of fresh hides. During the day, the sun's heat could dry out the leather too quickly, leaving it brittle and prone to cracking. But at night, the gentler, moister air settled in around you, keeping the leather pliable and easy to shape. Historians still argue whether medieval shoemakers truly planned their schedules for this reason alone, but your own hands know the truth. Leather at night simply behaves better. You slide a calloused palm over the rough surface, feeling for flaws, scars from the animal's life, thin spots, or puckered areas that could weaken a sole. These hides have traveled far, maybe from a local tannery that stank of oak bark and lime pits, or even imported from Spain or North Africa, prized for its smooth, durable finish. Medieval trade routes could be surprising that way. Shoes in a damp French village might be made of Moroccan goat leather, and you'd never guess. The night gives you time to pay proper respect to the leather's story. No one rushes you, no one interrupts to gossip or haggle. You can lay out the pattern slowly, measuring with a knotted cord, trimming carefully with your curved knife. The quiet makes you sharper, more attentive, and somehow more forgiving of the hide's flaws. One quirk about leather? It holds on to the day's heat, which means in those first hours after sunset, it's still warm and more workable, softening around your fingers like a living thing. You press your thumbs along the grain, feeling how it gives just enough, perfectly ready to shape into someone's dancing slipper or a peasant's work boot. There's a medieval belief, you recall, that leather needed to breathe in the moon before it could truly mold to the foot. Whether that was ritual or just poetic nonsense, who can say? Historians still argue whether such phrases meant anything more than a tradesman's superstition, but you have to admit, it's a lovely image. Leather soaking up the moonlight like a sleepy sponge. Your own memories of night leather are more practical. It holds its form better, takes wax more evenly, and accepts the stitching without splitting. You slip your bristle needle through a fresh hole, drawing waxed thread tight, the fibers creaking like a small ship's sail. Out in the night, there is no roar of passing carts to jolt your steady hand, no curious neighbor popping their head in to ask why the shoes aren't ready yet. Just you, the leather, and the soft breath of the town resting all around you. Sometimes you think of where these shoes will go. Will they cross miles of muddy roads? Will they dance in a feast hall? Or carry a pilgrim all the way to Compostela? You run your thumb across the edge of a heel, wondering how many stories leather like this has walked through, far beyond your workshop. There's a hidden pride in knowing you gave those stories a sturdy beginning. With each stitch, you're building a small shield between a foot and the cruel stones of the medieval road. You're protecting dreams, journeys, romances, all with a length of linen thread and a soft, obedient hide. You pause to rest your back, listening to the gentle rustle of night breezes slipping through the shutters. The faint scent of herbs drifts by from a nearby kitchen, maybe thyme or sage someone forgot to pack away. Little things like that remind you why night feels so welcoming. Even the smells are calmer, friendlier, than the heavy, sweaty tang of midday streets. One fringe story you once heard was that a master shoemaker swore by slicing his leather only under a waxing moon. He claimed it brought good fortune, both to his business and to the feet of his customers. Was that just an old man's quirk, or a hidden scrap of wisdom lost to time? Historians still argue whether moon phases truly guided tradesmen, or if these rituals were just a way to mark passing weeks. Either way, you'd rather slice your leather tonight than risk the heat of tomorrow. You pick up a fresh hide and lay it over your knee, its surface cool now, but soft as butter under your careful grip. The curved blade whispers through it in long, steady arcs, leaving behind the sweet, earthy smell of freshly cut leather. There is a hush to the night that makes every motion feel more graceful, more correct, as if the world itself were nodding approval. Tomorrow, these pieces will be soaked in warm water to shape around the wooden last. But for now, you admire their smooth edges, stacked like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. You run a knuckle along the grain, whispering a silent promise to do right by them. Because even a peasant deserves a well-made boot, strong enough to carry him to market and back without splitting apart on the first stone. As you bank the coals in the brazier, ready to soften another hide, you feel a flicker of gratitude, that in this world of clanging bells, harsh punishments, and constant gossip, there is still a simple, quiet dignity in working leather by night. You stretch your tired shoulders and reach for the next piece, ready to make something that just might outlive even you. The town clock's slow, echoing chimes mark the passing hours as you steady your hand for the next delicate task. Time in the medieval world was less a precise science and more a communal rhythm, a series of bells, a church choir's call, or the watchman's lantern swinging through shadowed alleys. Your work follows that same rhythm, measured not in minutes but in the tolling of nearby towers and the soft clanging of market bells signaling the start or end of business. The city's clocks and bells governed everything, the opening of city gates, the church's prayers, and even the guild's strict schedules. For shoemakers, the bells dictated when you could hammer, sew, and finally rest. Historians still argue whether these timekeepers enforced guild rules or simply reflected a natural, shared order among townsfolk, but you can feel it pulsing through your veins tonight. At each toll, you glance up, reminding yourself to pause briefly, crossing yourself in honor of Saint Crispin, the patron saint of cobblers, whose feast day was the only holiday sacred enough to bring your guild to a halt. His legend promised blessings to shoemakers, and you sometimes mutter a quiet thanks when your stitches hold firm or your leather doesn't split under your awl. The bells also marked the start of day traders arriving at dawn, eager to collect new shoes fresh from your workshop. Those early customers were the town's heartbeat, bringing gossip, tales, and urgent repairs. But for now, the night is yours. You tap your hammer gently, keeping time with the fading echoes of the clock tower, feeling connected to centuries of shoemakers before you, all waiting for the same chime to end their day. It's curious to think how these clocks, once a rarity, shaped your very workflow. Town clocks were expensive, and not every village had one. So many cobblers in smaller settlements simply worked by sun and shadow. But in the bustling medieval city, those mechanical timekeepers meant everything, creating a strict schedule that kept chaos at bay, and pushing shoemakers into the quieter night hours. Beyond the clocks, the church bells reminded the faithful of prayers and work times. Your guild would sometimes coordinate hammering breaks with the Angelus bell, giving apprentices a moment to rest their aching fingers or share a quick meal. These shared rituals gave structure to the night's otherwise solitary labor. You take a slow breath, feeling the rhythm settle deep inside. This is not just work, it's a dance you've practiced all your life. The long, steady chimes are like a metronome for your hammer, a pulse to match your heartbeat. The night air hums softly, filled with the distant crowing of roosters preparing to herald dawn. Sometimes you wonder how those bells would sound to someone from a distant land, a Mongol traveler or a Venetian merchant. Would they hear the same meaning in their tolling, or just strange clangs echoing over foreign rooftops? Historians still argue whether medieval timekeeping was more universal than we think, or if every town kept its own unique beat. Tonight, though, the bells belong to you. Their slow, steady cadence frames your work as you pull wax thread through leather holes, tap nails into thick sawls, and shape the final edges with worn tools that feel like old friends. In these quiet hours, between one bell and the next, you glimpse a connection, to the past shoemakers who hammered before you, to the cobblers who will come after, and to the unseen footsteps that will one day fill the shoes you make tonight. The steady rhythm of your hammer is interrupted by a soft tapping at the door, a reminder that the medieval night, while quieter, isn't entirely still. Perhaps a customer arrives with a last-minute repair, or a guild messenger bearing news of upcoming inspections or fees. Even in the dark hours, the world beyond your workshop persists, restless and alive. In your town, shoemakers had a reputation for both skilled craftsmanship and, surprisingly, a few eccentric habits. One such custom was the sharing of late-night tales among guild members, whispered after the day's orders were done. These stories, often humorous or mysterious, passed from cobbler to apprentice like precious secrets, weaving a thread of camaraderie through the solitude of nighttime work. Historians still argue whether these tales were mere folklore or based on real incidents, but they surely offered a welcome distraction from the repetitive motions of stitching and hammering. Tonight, as you settle into your routine, your mind drifts to one such story you heard in your youth, about a cobbler who supposedly crafted shoes so perfectly that they could charm their wearer, making them fleet-footed or even lucky in love. While this sounds like fanciful legend, it hints at a medieval belief in the magical properties of objects, especially those intimately worn like shoes. You smile at the thought. Perhaps every stitch carries a little magic of its own. The tools around you seem to take on a life of their own in the dim candlelight. Your awl gleams like a tiny sword, your hammer rests patiently, and the wooden last holds the promise of countless journeys. You run your fingers over the rough leather again, noting the slight imperfections, the scars and textures that remind you that each hide once belonged to a living creature. There's a solemn respect in treating these materials well, an unspoken bond between shoemaker and nature. Outside, the town breathes softly in the night. You can hear the faint murmur of the river winding past the city walls, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the distant barking of a dog on patrol. These sounds blend into a comforting background, a gentle reminder that even in darkness, life continues its slow, steady march. You work slowly, methodically, savoring the quiet moments between stitches. The waxed thread slips smoothly through the holes, the leather yielding just enough resistance to keep your hands alert. The scent of beeswax, leather, and a hint of night-blooming flowers from a nearby garden mingle in the cool air. Historians still debate whether medieval shoemakers' preference for nighttime work was driven more by practical concerns, like avoiding guild restrictions and city noise ordinances, or by a deeper connection to the rhythms of the natural world. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a balancing act between law, tradition, and personal preference. You imagine the apprentice you once were, wide-eyed and clumsy, struggling with these same tools under the watchful eye of a master cobbler. How the nights seemed endless then, filled with frustration and the occasional burst of laughter. Now, those hours have become a sanctuary, a place where focus and craft meet in quiet harmony. As the candle burns low, you finish another pair, setting them carefully on the shelf. The shoes look sturdy and well-made, ready to protect someone's feet on cobblestone streets or forest paths. You take a deep breath, savoring the feeling of a night's work done well, then prepare to rest until the bell calls you back to the quiet rhythm of the workshop once more. The faint flicker of candlelight casts long, wavering shadows across your worn workbench as you prepare the next set of saws. Night after night, this ritual grounds you, the simple act of shaping leather becoming both art and meditation. In the medieval world, such steady hands were a gift, and mastering them was no small feat. Apprentices often took years before their stitches were strong enough to survive daily wear, and even masters never ceased honing their craft. You reach for your wooden last, carved from dense beech or maple, its shape worn smooth by decades of use. Each last was uniquely tailored, some broad for farmers' boots, others narrow for the delicate slippers favored by town ladies. The care invested in shaping these molds reflects the pride in medieval shoemaking. Unlike today's mass production, every pair bore the mark of its maker, a silent signature in the subtle imperfections of form and finish. Historians still argue how much individuality medieval shoemakers could afford. Some suggest guild regulations pushed uniformity, while others believe craftsmen prized uniqueness as a selling point. Either way, you treasure the subtle differences, knowing each shoe is a small story stitched in leather. As you trace the outline of a sole, your thoughts drift to the customers who will wear these shoes. There's a village cobbler's daughter whose feet you measured weeks ago, delicate and nimble, destined for city dances and market errands. Then there's the grizzled smith who needs reinforced boots to endure the sparks flying from his forge. These shoes connect you to many lives, stitching together the fabric of your community. You pause to sharpen your knife on a smooth whetstone, the rhythmic grind a soothing counterpoint to the hammer's tap. Your blade must be keen, a dull edge could ruin expensive leather, wasting both material and time. Medieval shoemakers took pride in maintaining their tools, often passing them down through generations, each scratch and nick a badge of honor. Speaking of tools, there's a curious tradition among shoemakers involving the secret cobbler's knot, a distinctive stitch pattern rumored to ward off misfortune or ensure a good year's business. Some guilds even had ceremonies marking the first use of this knot by an apprentice, a rite of passage from learner to journeyman. Historians still debate the origins and significance of such customs, but you've seen enough old shoes with that telltale stitch to believe in its power. Outside, the night deepens, and the occasional murmur of distant tavern songs drifts through open windows. You imagine patrons laughing over ale, oblivious to your quiet labor. There's a certain pride in this solitude, a feeling that while others rest or revel, you are crafting the very shoes that will carry them home. Your hands move with practiced ease, punching holes along the sole's edge for stitching. The leather gives way under your awl, a satisfying little pop signaling readiness. There's something almost musical in this repetitive task, a lullaby woven from thread and hide. You think back to tales of cobblers whose shoes were so well crafted they lasted lifetimes, heirlooms passed down from parent to child, each pair holding the imprint of countless journeys. Such stories fuel your dedication, a reminder that your work is not merely functional but enduring. Remembering those old stories, you recall a whispered legend about a shoemaker who embroidered secret messages into the soles of his shoes, hidden blessings or warnings only visible when worn thin. Some say this practice was a clever way to pass messages during times of war or unrest. Historians still argue whether such tales are based in truth or the fertile imaginations of apprentices eager to spice up their nights. As dawn approaches, the city's sounds begin to stir. Roosters crow, the first carts rattle through narrow lanes. But you're nearly finished with your night's work, each pair carefully inspected before being set aside. Your fingers ache, but your heart is full. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that through centuries, countless shoemakers have shared this same ritual, their nights blending into yours in an unbroken chain of craftsmanship and care. You lean back, stretching your shoulders and savoring the cool air that slips through your workshop window. You glance once more at your finished shoes, their soft leather gleaming faintly in the candlelight, and you feel a deep sense of accomplishment. This isn't just about shoes, it's about supporting your family, your community, and the traditions that tie you to generations past. Outside, the moon begins its slow descent, signaling the approach of a new day. You extinguish your candle and prepare to rest, knowing that when night falls again, your tools and your craft will be waiting. You begin the next night's work by setting out your leather scraps, carefully sorting them by thickness and texture. These small decisions matter. Thicker hides will become soles or sturdy boots, while thinner pieces are reserved for the delicate uppers of finer shoes. Your fingers brush over each piece, sensing its readiness for the task ahead. This tactile connection is vital. After all, a shoemaker's best tool is their touch. In medieval times, the quality of leather varied widely. Tanners used different methods depending on the animal and region, from vegetable tanning with tree bark to oil tanning favored in colder climates. These techniques gave the leather distinct colors and durability. You've heard of prized Cordovan leather, made from the hindquarters of Spanish horses, celebrated for its glossy finish and resilience. Having a piece of Cordovan was like owning a treasure, often reserved for nobility or wealthy merchants. Working at night allowed you to appreciate these subtle differences. The moonlight filtering through your window seems to bring out colors invisible in harsh daylight. Historians still debate whether medieval shoemakers intentionally timed their work by lunar phases to maximize leather quality, or if it was a romantic notion passed down through generations. Your awl punctures the leather with a satisfying pop, threading the waxed linen through each hole. Wax, often made from beeswax and sometimes mixed with resins or oils, protected the thread from moisture and wear. You think of how essential this simple substance was, a medieval shoemaker's invisible shield against the elements. A quirky fact you remember: some shoemakers believed beeswax held a faint life force, which transferred to their shoes, imbuing them with durability and even good luck. While that might sound like superstition today, such beliefs shaped the daily rituals and care shoemakers gave their craft. The ambient night hum envelopes you, the distant bark of a watchdog, the rustling of a night breeze through narrow alleys, and the occasional splash from the river nearby. These sounds punctuate the solitude, creating a comforting symphony that keeps you company. You pause to stretch, recalling a peculiar medieval practice where some shoemakers scented their workshops with herbs like lavender or rosemary, claiming these fragrances helped steady their hands and soothe tired eyes. It makes sense. Working intricate stitches under dim candlelight required all the focus and calm one could muster. While the guild imposed strict regulations on shoe quality and pricing, many shoemakers operated semi-independently at night, escaping the watchful eyes of inspectors and rival craftsmen. This freedom fostered creativity and experimentation with styles and materials. Historians still argue how much innovation happened in these nocturnal hours, but the variety of shoe designs found in archaeological digs suggests plenty. As your needle pulls tight, you think of the many feet that will walk miles in your handiwork: merchants navigating crowded markets, children running errands, or noblewomen attending court. Every pair carries a silent promise of comfort and protection. You dip your fingers in a small pot of leather dye, adding subtle touches to a pair destined for a local merchant. Color was a statement in medieval society. Certain hues were reserved for the elite, while common folk stuck to natural browns and tans. Yet, the clever shoemaker found ways to mimic these effects, using inexpensive dyes or decorative stitching to appeal to clients' tastes. The night deepens, and fatigue threatens to settle in your bones, but you push forward, savoring the rhythm of your craft. There is magic here, not the kind found in fairy tales, but a quiet, enduring magic born of skill, patience, and respect for materials. As dawn's first light brushes the horizon, you lay down your tools with care. Your workshop is a small universe of order amidst the sprawling chaos of the medieval city, a sanctuary where nightfall means creation, and every stitch tells a story. You recall a whispered legend told among shoemakers, that leather listens to its maker, softening under the hands of one who treats it kindly and stiffening for the careless. While this might sound like an old wives' tale, there's no denying that your most careful work produces the finest shoes, as if the leather itself cooperates in gratitude. Outside, the city is beginning to wake, the clatter of carts and the shouts of vendors slowly replacing the nighttime symphony. You feel a twinge of pride knowing that your labor tonight will soon support those bustling streets, the merchant's hurried steps, the child's eager run, the noble's stately walk. There's comfort in the thought that your craft, like the city itself, is part of an unbroken chain stretching through time. Each stitch, cut, and hammer strike a link binding past to future. This is the quiet legacy of the medieval shoemaker, working mostly at night, shaping not just shoes but the very paths people walk. You begin tonight's work by preparing your tools with care, mindful of the delicate balance between precision and wear. The aul's tip is sharpened just so, the hammer's face free of dents, and your needles threaded with waxed linen, ready for the night's rhythm. Craftsmanship isn't just about skill, it's also a dance with your tools, partners in the quiet nocturnal ballet of shoemaking. Medieval workshops were intimate places, often tucked away in narrow lanes or behind modest shop fronts. The air inside carries a mixture of scents: fresh leather, beeswax, and the faint trace of tanning agents like oak bark or alum. These smells settle into your skin and clothes, marking you as a craftsman long before your hands do. It's fascinating to consider that many shoemakers worked in these small, often windowless rooms to avoid the distractions and noise of the bustling streets. The night offered a respite from the chaos of daytime markets and guild disputes, creating a cocoon of focus and quiet productivity. Historians still debate how much the physical setting influenced shoemaking techniques and schedules, but there's no denying the comfort that darkness can bring. You pull out a particularly thick piece of leather, destined for a heavy work boot. The hide is tough, with deep grain patterns and slight imperfections that speak of the animal's life. Each mark tells a story, perhaps a scar from a predator's claw or a brush with a thorny bush. You feel a quiet reverence for these traces, knowing they add character and strength to the finished shoe. A curious medieval belief lingers in your mind. Some shoemakers thought leather possessed a memory, retaining impressions from its past and even absorbing the maker's mood. Whether superstition or poetic metaphor, this idea reminds you that your work is more than mechanical, it's deeply personal. As you begin cutting, the blade glides through the hide with a satisfying smoothness, the sound barely a whisper in the still night. You measure carefully, knowing that every cut must be precise. Leather is unforgiving, and mistakes waste precious material and time. You pause to listen to the distant toll of the city bell, its echoes threading through the alleyways. The sound anchors you in time, a reminder that while your work is solitary, it is also part of a larger community and rhythm. Working by candlelight requires patience and adaptability. Shadows dance on the walls, and the flickering glow can play tricks on the eyes, making straight lines seem crooked or hiding small flaws. This challenge demands focus but also cultivates a kind of calm mindfulness, a gentle meditation on craft. Some medieval shoemakers carried small talismans or charms in their workshops, believed to protect their hands from injury or bring luck to their creations. Perhaps a carved wooden shoe, a sprig of rosemary, or a tiny bell. Historians still argue about the prevalence and purpose of these objects, but their existence adds a layer of mystery and humanity to the craft. You think about the customers who will wear these shoes: farmers trudging through muddy fields, merchants navigating cobblestone streets, and perhaps a traveling minstrel chasing stories from town to town. Each pair you make is a vessel for countless journeys, woven into the fabric of daily medieval life. You gently shape the thick leather on the wooden last, the curves coming alive under your hands. The last itself is a tool and a form of art, often carved by master woodworkers, tailored to local tastes and foot shapes. You can tell a lot about a region from the shape of its shoes: broad and sturdy in farming villages, slender and pointed in the courts of nobility. This little wooden figure is like the secret skeleton of every shoe you craft. The steady tap of your hammer and the scratch of needle on leather form a soothing soundtrack, blending with the night's natural chorus. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the occasional bark from a distant dog. These sounds create a gentle rhythm that carries you through the hours until dawn. As the first light of morning creeps into your workshop, you set down your tools and survey your work. The shoes are sturdy, well-crafted, and ready to face the world. You feel a quiet pride, knowing your night's labor will help others walk safely, comfortably, and with a touch of style. You think back on the many cobblers who came before you, their hands guided by the same ancient rhythms, crafting footwear for peasants and kings alike. Though centuries have passed, this intimate connection to craft, patience, and community remains unchanged. The night greets you again, with its familiar hush and gentle chill, as you slip back into your workshop. There is something almost sacred about this space at night, as if the walls themselves understand your purpose and hold their breath to let you work in peace. You light a new candle, its golden glow flickering across the grain of the wooden benches, and prepare to begin. Tonight, your hands will work on a challenging commission, a pair of elegant slippers for a wealthy merchant's wife. Her measurements were exacting, her preferences even more so. The silk lining she requested, dyed a rare shade of pale blue, arrived only yesterday from the cloth merchant near the market square. Silk was precious in medieval Europe, often reserved for the nobility, but some prosperous townspeople wanted their share of luxury, and you were more than happy to oblige if the coin was right. Silk linings presented their own challenges. Slippery, thin, and prone to fraying, they demanded a light touch and absolute precision. Your hands must be steady, even though your eyes are still adjusting to the shifting candlelight. You chuckle softly, remembering that medieval guild regulations often tried to limit how luxurious a commoner's shoes could be, though most people found ways around those rules. Historians still argue whether guild inspectors actually enforced those restrictions or merely collected their dues and looked the other way. As you line up your silks, you breathe in their faint perfume. The cloth merchant claimed he'd stored them with dried lavender to keep moths away, and you appreciate the subtle sweetness wafting from the fabric. Lavender, rosemary, and thyme were common medieval herbs, not only for cooking but for warding off pests, and, some believed, for warding off bad spirits. Your mind wanders for a moment, imagining how many other hands touched this silk on its long journey across continents before it arrived here, under your needle. You fit the soft lining into the leather, your needle dancing along the edges like a patient waltz. It takes all your focus, but there's a calm joy in getting each stitch to lie flat, unwrinkled, and perfectly aligned. Medieval shoemakers were judged harshly for sloppy work, especially on luxury orders, where the guild might even fine a master shoemaker for mistakes. You feel the weight of that tradition on your shoulders, but it is a comforting kind of burden, the kind that reminds you of your place in a long, proud lineage. The night air grows colder, and you draw your cloak tighter, sparing a glance at the street beyond your window. The town seems to slumber deeply tonight, with fewer night watchmen calling out their rounds, and only the muted clatter of a distant donkey cart interrupting the silence. You remember how some shoemakers, especially in busier cities, would slip coins to the watchman to keep an extra eye on their shops during night work. Historians still debate whether these quiet deals counted as bribery or simply practical protection. Returning to your slippers, you test the fit around the last, smoothing the leather and silk as one seamless form. It is delicate work, demanding the perfect tension on every thread. As you lean closer, you catch the faintest creak of the wooden beams above, like the house settling into its own kind of sleep. The sounds of a medieval building at rest, timbers shifting, a soft scurry of a mouse in the rafters, are strangely soothing companions in your vigil. You pause to rub your tired hands, flexing your fingers to keep them limber. Remembering a trick from an old journeyman, you hold your hands close to the candle's warmth to relax the knuckles, then stretch them wide. It helps, and you return to your work with renewed steadiness. The old shoemakers believed that a craftsman's hands needed tending like any other tool, a truth you live by every night. The candle guttered once, reminding you that dawn would soon break. You push through the last stitches, carefully knotting the waxed linen, then trimming the edges with your sharp little scissors. Finally, you slip the slippers off the last, smoothing their delicate curves with a gentle brush of your palm. They are beautiful, fit for dancing in candlelit halls or pacing softly across polished floors. You place them gently on the shelf with your other finished work, satisfied that they will carry their wearer with comfort and pride. Another night's labor complete, you allow yourself a breath of relief. Outside, the faintest glow of morning peaks above the rooftops, promising another day in a city where shoemakers, by night, keep its people moving by day. The candlelight greets you once again, its gentle glow steady and comforting as you begin another night of quiet creation. Tonight's project is a humble one, repairing a pair of sturdy workman's boots, their thick soles worn through after months of trudging over muddy fields and stone roads. The boots carry the smell of earth and toil, the leather scuffed and scratched from honest labor. They remind you of countless other shoes that pass through your hands, shoes that tell the stories of daily survival. You flex the worn boot, studying how the seams have loosened and the sole has separated in spots. Some might dismiss such repairs as tedious, but you find a certain peace in restoring what was nearly lost. There's a kind of respect in mending, as if you're giving the boots a second chance to do their work. In medieval times, shoes were too precious to throw away on a whim, and cobblers often made a healthy side income by patching and repairing them. Even the wealthy brought their shoes in for repairs, since materials and skilled labor were never cheap. Historians still argue whether cobblers, who mostly repaired shoes, and cordwainers, who made them from scratch, cooperated or competed in medieval guilds. The records suggest a bit of both, rivalries one day, brotherly sharing of tools the next. You chuckle at the thought, some things never change in the working world. You lift the boot to your nose, catching the faint scent of pitch, used to waterproof the soles, mingled with the musk of old sweat. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's honest, real. You pry away the rotted stitches, then measure out a new length of waxed thread. The fresh linen glides between your fingers, ready to anchor the layers back together, a thread connecting past to present. As your awl punctures through the sole, you notice tiny pebbles still embedded in the leather. They tell you where the wearer has been, from farmyards to markets, maybe even a churchyard path on Sundays. Each stone feels like a tiny witness, holding its place until you brush it free. You sweep them aside with a quiet respect, wondering how many stories hide in these boots. The hammer and last work their slow magic, smoothing and reshaping the battered soles. Medieval shoemakers often sang under their breath to pass the long hours, and you find yourself humming a simple tune. The sound echoes gently through the shop, mixing with the night breeze and the faint scuffle of a rat in the alley beyond your window. These small noises feel like old friends by now, familiar and somehow reassuring. You think of the man who owns these boots, imagining his calloused feet, his sun-browned face, and the countless hours he spends bent over the soil. Your stitches will protect him through weeks of rain and chill, supporting his labors as much as any tool in his field. It's easy to forget how important shoes are until they fail you. That's why your trade will always matter, no matter what century you live in. You pause to flex your aching wrists, remembering how masters once taught apprentices to break up their work with small exercises. Gripping a wooden rod, stretching their fingers, rolling their shoulders. Those lessons have kept you steady through countless nights, guarding your hands against the stiffness of repetitive tasks. In truth, medieval craftsmen were early experts in body mechanics, even if they wouldn't have used those modern words. Returning to the boot, you stitch with slow, careful precision, layering the sole with fresh leather and pressing it flat. You can feel the structure strengthening under your hands, a transformation as real as any miracle. The rhythmic pull of your thread through the hide is almost hypnotic, each tug tightening your thoughts into a calm focus. Outside, the faint hoot of an owl signals that dawn is not far off. You breathe in the night air, letting it cool your face, before making the final knots that bind your work. These repaired boots are ready for many more miles, and you smile at that small triumph. Your candle burns low, and you let its last glow rest on the sturdy shape of the boots, now mended and whole. As you tidy your bench and stretch out the stiffness from your spine, you remember that shoemakers of centuries past would leave a blessing inside the final seam. Nothing fancy, just a quiet wish that the wearer would walk safely and return home at the end of the day. You nod to yourself and whisper that same blessing into the night, a timeless hope carried by leather, wax, and faith. You light a fresh candle, the flame flaring softly as wax begins to melt around its tiny wick. Tonight, the task before you is one you particularly enjoy: crafting a pair of children's shoes. There is something so hopeful, so deeply endearing about tiny boots or slippers, their miniature shape a reminder that someone will learn to walk, to run, to live fully while protected by your handiwork. Children's shoes, though small, often took nearly as much skill as those for adults. Their feet grow quickly and unpredictably, requiring patterns that allow for a bit of expansion, flexible enough for growth yet sturdy enough to keep out the chill. You sort through your pile of thinner leathers, selecting a soft, pliable hide dyed a gentle brown. The faint scent of the dye mingles with the beeswax from your thread, a combination as familiar to you as your own breath. In medieval towns, many children went barefoot most of the year, shoes being reserved for cold months or for Sundays and festivals. But those whose families could afford them treasured their first proper pair of shoes, proof of growing up, of being cared for, of belonging. You think of how proud a child might feel to slip on a new pair, just as you once did, that thrill of stepping into something made just for you. As you trace the pattern onto the hide, you think about the parents who came to your workshop earlier, eager but a little anxious. They measured their child's feet with clumsy affection, worried about comfort and price, fretting about whether the child might soon outgrow them. Historians still argue whether medieval parents were especially protective of children or simply practical, but there is no doubt they wanted to show love, and a good pair of shoes was part of that care. You work the awl carefully through the small pieces, the holes closer together than on larger boots, each stitch a whisper of protection. In many places, parents would sprinkle a pinch of dried herbs, rosemary, thyme, or sometimes even a shred of linen from a saint's garment, into the shoe to guard the child against misfortune. The scent lingers in your memory from other children's shoes you have made, as if those little charms still hover in the corners of the workshop. There is a tenderness in these tasks. It pulls at your heart, making you think about the circle of life unfolding through these shoes. The child will scrape them on cobbles, stomp through puddles, maybe even run down dusty lanes chasing a dog. Each scuff and stain will be another chapter in a small but important story. The night air is particularly cool tonight, and you pause to warm your hands over the candle, flexing your knuckles before returning to the delicate work. Your tools feel just right, balanced, familiar, almost like extensions of your own will. You think of apprentices who once fumbled with these same tools, the way you did, until their hands learned to flow along with the grain of the leather. You allow yourself a private grin, remembering your own first pair of shoes for a child, crooked seams and all. You test the fit on the tiny wooden last, smiling at the impossibly small curve of the arch, a reminder of how fragile these little feet are. It makes you want to stitch a blessing into the lining, something unspoken but powerful. Walk well, walk safe, find your way home. Medieval shoemakers sometimes tucked a prayer slip into children's shoes, a tiny scrap of parchment inked with a psalm or a saint's name. Historians still debate whether this was truly common or a regional habit, but you rather like the idea. The stitches pull true, closing up the heel. The soft leather feels almost weightless in your hand, as if the shoes might float away. You think about the first steps a child will take in them, and a warmth glows in your chest, an unexpected pride, gentle and profound. Beyond your window, the first birds are beginning to murmur, their faint calls blending with the gentle rush of the river nearby. You set the finished pair down beside the others, watching how the candlelight paints them golden for a moment before you blow out the flame. It is another night's work done, another chapter sewn shut. You stretch your fingers and take a last look at the children's shoes, knowing they will carry small dreams far and wide, along paths you can only imagine. And in that thought, there is peace. You settle in for another night's labor, this time to work on a commission both delicate and significant, a pair of ceremonial shoes for a guild officer. These aren't everyday boots to slog through mud, nor dainty slippers to dance in. These are status shoes, meant to command respect, to stand on high platforms, to preside over trade agreements and feasts. There's a certain weight in making such footwear, because you know the wearer will measure your skill not just in comfort but in pride. You unfold a piece of fine, dark leather, polished to a near mirror-like sheen thanks to layers of oil and beeswax. It smells rich, earthy and deep, almost intimidating in its perfection. You run your hand across the hide and think of the animals, the tanners, the merchants who carried it over leagues of dusty roads to get it to you. This leather has traveled far, and now its final journey will be under your knife. A guild officer's shoes must be built to last, but they must also impress. Decorative stitching will be needed, perhaps even metal eyelets or a small band of embroidery, subtle but unmistakable. Medieval officers liked to show just enough ornamentation to separate them from common tradesmen, without tipping into arrogance that might anger the guild's members. Historians still debate whether these flourishes were intended to signal virtue or wealth, but everyone agrees they were a kind of social shorthand. You carefully measure the guild officer's foot template, marked by a scribe earlier in the week, double-checking every line. You can't afford to guess. If the fit is wrong, you risk your reputation and the guild's confidence. In some towns, a shoemaker could be fined for delivering poorly made ceremonial shoes, and you have no intention of paying that penalty. The night is hushed around you, save for the faint crackle of the candle. A breeze stirs the straw on the floor, and for a moment you listen, wondering if you've heard a far-off bell or simply your own heartbeat. You smile, steady your hands, and make the first cut. The blade parts the leather like silk, as though it respects your care. You pause to mark the pattern for a decorative toe cap, planning a modest flourish of cross-stitch in red thread. The color stands out boldly on the black leather, striking but dignified. You think about how colors were regulated by sumptuary laws, how even the shade of a shoe could draw suspicion from an envious neighbor. Still, a guild officer had a bit more leeway, and you are determined to balance elegance with caution. Your hands begin their dance again, stitching, pulling, hammering, shaping. The night becomes a tunnel of quiet focus, and the outside world fades to a vague blur. Shoemakers often spoke of a work trance, when the flow of labor was so smooth that hours would vanish like a single blink. You feel that state now, a calm river of repetition and purpose. As you press the toe cap into place, you recall that in some guilds, officers would present their shoes as tokens at the end of their term, handing them down to a new officer or even donating them to a chapel. Historians still argue if this tradition was widespread or more localized, but you like the idea of shoes as a legacy, passed from one leader to the next. A gust of wind rattles the shutters, drawing you back to the moment. You stand, stretch your back, and shake out your fingers. The candle burns low, throwing long shadows along the workbench, making the leather gleam with a deep, honey-colored glow. Returning to the stitches, you check your work, smoothing the inside seams, tapping down tiny bumps with a gentle stroke of your hammer. Every detail matters. These are the shoes of a leader, a man who will judge you as much by your skill as by your respect for tradition. The weight of history is heavy, but it comforts you too. You belong to a trade that survives, century after century, one stitch at a time. As you pull the final threads taut, you think of all the other ceremonial shoes you have heard about. Shoes gifted to bishops, shoes sent across seas as diplomatic tokens, shoes buried in tombs to accompany their owners into the afterlife. The symbolism of shoes in medieval society was powerful. They represented not just social rank, but a person's readiness to step forward, to leave their mark on the world. You remember a rumor an old journeyman once told you, about a guild master who hid a tiny coin inside the heel of every ceremonial shoe he made, as a sign of prosperity and to ward off ruin. Whether it was true or not, it makes you smile, and you consider, just for a moment, slipping a coin into the lining, a quiet wish for good fortune. Historians still debate whether these tokens were actually common or just folk legend, but the idea feels comforting on a night like this. You run your fingers over the finished seams one more time, checking for flaws by touch as well as sight. The leather feels strong yet flexible, the decoration elegant without being gaudy, the shape balanced to suit both ceremony and walking. You know these shoes will carry confidence and authority into many meetings and halls. A rooster crows somewhere far off, telling you the night is nearly gone. You yawn, blinking away the stiffness in your eyes, and place the shoes gently on a clean cloth. They rest like royal treasures in the dim glow of the workshop, a testament to your patience, your craft, and the centuries of shoemaking tradition behind you. You extinguish the candle, letting smoke curl upward in a thin gray thread. There is something satisfying about seeing that tiny wisp of smoke, as if the night itself is signing off on your efforts. The hush returns, broken only by the slow creak of the door as you step out to greet the dawn. You allow yourself a moment to breathe in the cool morning air, the pale light brushing across the rooftops. Another night's work done. Another tale told through leather and thread. You gather up your tools, quietly humming a tune the old masters might have known, and whisper a final blessing over the shoes. May their wearer stand tall and never falter. You draw another slow breath as the new night begins, readying yourself for a project with a slightly different challenge: crafting a pair of travel shoes. These will go to a spice merchant, a man whose journeys are long and rough, carrying cinnamon, cloves, pepper, and saffron across miles of unpredictable roads. Travel shoes must be stronger than ordinary shoes, but flexible enough to adapt to harsh conditions, a test of your skills in balancing durability with comfort. You sort through your stock for a firm but supple cowhide, thick enough to hold up to mud and gravel but with enough give to mold to the wearer's foot. Travel shoes must never pinch or rub, or they'll leave blisters that could ruin entire weeks of trade. A good travel shoe is more valuable than a horse, the old saying goes, because a horse can throw you, but your shoes carry you wherever you stand. As you begin to measure, you think of the merchant stories. Bandits on the road, merchants forced to sleep under wagons, the endless clatter of carts and braying of mules in roadside inns. You smile at the thought, knowing that a well-made shoe will guard him on those weary nights. The candle's glow pools across your workbench, picking out the grain of the leather, revealing scars from the animal's life, marks of survival that will now serve to protect another life on the road. You trace the outlines, using a travel shoe pattern passed down from a journeyman who claimed it was inspired by North African traders. Historians still argue whether medieval merchants truly borrowed these patterns or merely imitated their styles, but you like to think there was a bit of both, a cross-cultural weaving of knowledge that passed through each port and caravan. A distant night watchman calls the hour in the street beyond, his voice thin and echoing through the alleys. You shift your shoulders, warming them against the chill draft, and set to work cutting the leather panels, careful to keep the pieces symmetrical. Nothing is worse than mismatched travel shoes, which would throw off the gait of even the steadiest traveler. As you begin stitching, you remember an old superstition. Merchants sometimes asked you to sew a scrap of parchment with a prayer for protection under the insole, hoping to guard against highway robbers and evil spirits. You half consider doing it yourself, though you grin at the thought of the merchant's face if he found your secret blessing inside. Historians still debate whether these prayers truly offered any comfort, or were simply a hopeful gesture against a dangerous world. Your awl pushes through the leather with steady precision, the candlelight catching on the fresh wax thread. You pull it tight, listening to the gentle squeak of the stitch, a soft and rhythmic music that helps you forget the hour. Outside, the night seems to stretch forever, a perfect bubble of calm while you work. The sawls are layered thickly, stitched and pegged for extra strength, a pattern designed to help resist the mud of country roads and the sharp stones that could slice through lesser shoes. You can almost feel the weight of the finished pair as you shape them, imagining their steady presence on a long trail, through forests and marshes, across rattling bridges where boards groan and shift under heavy carts. You pause for a sip of water, flexing your tired fingers. Medieval shoemakers had to be careful not to ruin their hands with strain, because losing the steadiness of your grip could destroy your entire livelihood. So you stretch gently, then settle back into the soothing routine of stitch after stitch, hammer tap after hammer tap. You remember hearing of a merchant who claimed he had walked all the way to Venice and back in a single pair of shoes, their soles patched so many times they were nearly as thick as armor. True or not, it is a reminder of what a good shoemaker can do. Make something that outlasts the journey, a quiet partner in the struggle to survive. As you align the heel caps and fix the final stitches, you feel a quiet pride build inside you. These shoes will carry not just a person, but also their trade, their stories, and their hope for profit and security. It is a strange but wonderful feeling to help keep commerce moving across so many miles, one pair of shoes at a time. The first hint of morning slips across the sky as you check your work, smoothing down the seams and brushing away stray threads. You slip the shoes onto their wooden last for one final inspection. The silhouette looks strong, honest, ready for thousands of steps, and you nod, satisfied. Blowing out the candle, you tidy your tools and set the travel shoes on the shelf, next to the children's slippers and the ceremonial officer's pair. They stand together like a quiet family, each one carrying its own promise, its own mission, its own small piece of medieval life. As you stretch your back and rub the stiffness from your arms, you think one last gentle wish for the spice merchant. May these shoes carry you safely, past dangers seen and unseen, and always bring you home again. Tonight feels like the last chapter of a very long book, as you settle once more in your humble workshop. This time, your task is to repair an old pair of shoes belonging to an elderly midwife. You know these shoes well, you've repaired them twice already, the leather softened by years of night journeys to birthrooms, by hurried steps across flagstones and winter lanes, by countless visits to crying mothers and newborns. These shoes have seen joy and loss, pain and relief, all carried in their worn seams. You lift one to the light, studying the sole that is nearly worn through. The heel is scuffed raw, the welt unraveling, and yet the shoe still holds its shape with surprising grace. There is a dignity in these battered old shoes that tugs at you, a quiet testament to a lifetime of service. You ease apart the stitching with care, thinking of the woman who wears them, how many lives she has helped begin, how many blessings she has whispered. A sweet, smoky smell rises from the old leather as you warm it, readying it for reshaping. There is beeswax and tallow soaked into its grain, traces of centuries-old recipes for waterproofing, known to midwives and shepherds alike. Medieval women had their own practical remedies for preserving shoes, sometimes adding a touch of rosemary or sage to ward off sickness along with the damp. Historians still argue whether these recipes were truly effective or just folk comfort, but their fragrance seems to linger with a protective hush. Your all glides through the leather, guided by habit as much as skill. You stitch new life into the failing seams, reinforcing where the threads have broken, taking extra care with a heel that bears so much weight. This is no hurried repair, but a mindful restoration, almost an act of respect. You catch yourself whispering, half to the shoes, half to the night. Walk safely, walk surely, bring hope wherever you go. Outside, the world is still. Only the faintest owl call carries through the streets, the same owl you've heard night after night, a watchman of its own kind. You wonder if that owl has watched over the midwife too, as she hurried through darkness to help a woman in pain. The night is full of these small guardians, unseen but steady, each doing their part. As you bend the sole into place and hammer tiny pegs to hold the new leather, you think about the many times these shoes have hurried to homes where new life was beginning. How many babies drew their first breath as these shoes waited by a hearth? How many fathers paced around them, worrying? There is a kind of quiet awe in knowing that shoes can carry so many stories without ever saying a word. You pause to rub your wrist, the joint protesting after so many hours of repetition. Medieval shoemakers learned early to pace themselves or risk lifelong pain. Some tied rags around their wrists to brace their joints, a simple but effective trick that you sometimes use yourself. The rhythm of the hammer comforts you as you return to tapping down the heel, aligning each peg with patient attention. When you finally tie off the last stitch, you let out a slow breath. The shoes look renewed, ready to carry the midwife through more long nights, more worried families, more whispered blessings. They will bear witness to fresh joys and quiet heartbreaks, just as they always have. You wipe them clean with a soft cloth, working beeswax into the leather until it shines with a gentle glow. Then you place them on the bench and simply watch them, as if they might speak to you. There is so much life in these shoes, so much silent devotion, that you feel a sting in your eyes, a rare moment of emotion catching you off guard. The faintest light of dawn reaches through your shutters, brushing the shoes with a warm, hopeful glow. You know the midwife will come for them soon, ready to face another round of deliveries, another night of quiet courage. And you are grateful to have played a part, however small, in keeping her going. You rest your tired hands, looking over the shoes you've finished through these long nights. Ceremonial, children's, workman's boots, travel shoes, and now these. Each one a chapter in a larger story, each one a thread in the vast human tapestry. And now, the night draws to a gentle close, your candle melting lower, its glow a calm farewell. You ease yourself back on the small stool, breathing slowly as you let the rhythm of the workshop fall silent around you. Every tool, every scrap of leather, every delicate stitch seems to exhale with you, softening, resting, ready to dream. You allow your mind to wander over all the shoes you have tended, their soles like pages in a diary, recording each journey, each hope, each burden. Let those stories fade, now, like gentle echoes across a quiet field. Let your shoulders grow heavy, your breath slow and warm. You are safe, your work complete, the night forgiving. The air moves through the shutters with the lightest sigh, carrying away the worries of these long hours. You listen to its hush, its peace, its invitation to let go. In your mind, You picture the shoes lined up, waiting, their owners sleeping soundly or stepping into their own dawns, guided by the strength you gave them. Let that thought carry you into calm, deeper and deeper, where the rhythms of your heart match the rhythms of the night. All is well. You have served your purpose, and now you may rest, too. Feel free to close your eyes, to drift, to trust that your craft is held steady, your hands have been faithful, and your place in the world is secure. Now, the night belongs to dreams. Rest gently, dream softly, and let morning find you renewed.